Since the 1990s, we've had more modern GUI applications mostly built with a browser as the front end and the web as a replacement for desktop applications. A big part of the reason for this is that it is a much more efficient model for testing the software, and it also solves one of the major problems with software, at least from the developer standpoint, which is, and the product manager's standpoint, which is the installation of software. And this installation problem is an ongoing thing with a web application. You just click on your browser, you go to the URL, and that's all you have to do. It introduces all sorts of other problems, like how do you do data sharing? Do you really have access to your Facebook data or not, is the question. And lots of applications are built where the interface is a web interface, and you don't have access to the data at all. For instance, a common one that I've been exposed to recently is an IBM called IBM Food Trust. And it's a really beautifully architected system that allows you to trace the origins of food for food safety. And in the contract that you sign with IBM, it explicitly says that all the data that you enter belongs to you. And they have this application programming interface, an API into it, so that you can enter new data and update records of data, and there is no API for you to ever get your data back out. So although you own the data, you can't access the data. And this causes all sorts of interesting problems. But from IBM's perspective, it's a great thing because it guarantees that once you've entered a whole bunch of data, you're going to have to continue to pay them gobs of money forever to be able to use your own data. And people will not want to migrate off of it. So people like Tyson Foods and Walmart are unhappily stuck and glued to this system that they can't now get away from. Now, under the covers, that particular one, the IBM Food Trust, is running on a thing called a blockchain database called Hyperledger. But a big class of system software, and probably the original application for shared system software, is databases. And I want to talk to you about databases and how they work. They are an environment of their own. The original database was developed as a part of the Saturn V project. It was called the IMS, the Information Management System, and it was developed for the tracking of all the parts that went into the Saturn V rockets. IBM followed this original work that they did on that contract with a bunch of work into different query languages. At the time, there was this thing called pt5, which was a query language that worked with databases, primarily those that were used in COBOL. But they wanted a better query language, and along with some other folks, they developed this thing called standard query language or structured query language, SQL. And it works pretty good. It's not great, but it has strong mathematical underpinnings of how it works and why it works. And you can build optimizers for it that allow you to specify what you want to get as a declaration, basically, a query, and have the computer write a program to go get that for you. So it's an automated programming system. And one of the people that worked on this guy, Larry Ellison, he worked for IBM. He quit IBM, moved out to California, and bought this little software company that built something else and got their developers to switch over to building a SQL database. He renamed the company Oracle, and he's made a little bit of money at that. And today you see that that is the number one database in business applications. Although I have worked in it for years, I tend to these days use a different database called Postgres. But the two things that have most of the structured data in the world in it are Microsoft Excel and the Oracle database. And the Oracle database is marvelously scalable. It's a wonderful thing if you have a big application. It's also very, very expensive. Here at the University of Wyoming, they use it for their accounting and HR records. So it's used in lots of places. One of the first things that the databases had is they centralized the data to some sort of a server, and you access the data remotely from other computers. And this had lots of advantages because you could back up that central server, you could put security around it. So there was good things about this, but it also meant that you're remotely accessing the data across some sort of a network. And that meant you had to build in this security layer. Some database applications did really well with this. Oracle, for example, and Postgres have built robust security layers. Some others, like Microsoft SQL, has a known flaw in it that's been around for at least a decade, having to do with being able to spoof what you send into the system and remotely execute not just stuff in the database, but actually access the system from the database and be able to remotely execute and corrupt the system and change register keys and run malicious software at the privilege level of the database on the system. So it has ongoing security problems. But some of them managed to work this out and be very robust about it. I also think that databases in a certain sense have de-evolved. I mean, I've been doing database software for long enough that I can remember back before the age of SQL. And there were lots of network and graph databases that eventually got all overrun by the fact that you could build the same thing in Oracle or another SQL database like Postgres, and you would get better performance. And you also got, along the way, relational tables and queries and a whole bunch of other stuff that you didn't have before. So these days we see a resurgence in some of these things, like network databases, Neo4j, and graph databases. MongoDB, for example, is a non-SQL data store, a document store. I do a lot of testing on what the performance is because I just don't take it for granted in the wonderful marketing literature that every company puts out. And from what I can tell, you can still do the things that these databases do somewhere in the 4 to 10 times as fast in Postgres, and you also get relational tables and backups and backup systems and all the good things that come with Postgres. So I'm less enamored with them than lots of people seem to be. But there's a whole class of developers out there that are just in love with MongoDB because it runs JavaScript. And that means that you can have a single language that goes from your front end all the way to your back end database. By the way, Postgres also runs JavaScript. So, I'm less enamored. There are some applications for which these things do really well. For instance, time series data where you're collecting log files. Elasticsearch is another database that is a time series database, and it does a fantastic job at doing this and does it at scale. But not everybody needs the kind of scale that you get with this. There are lots of applications that don't need it. Not all of us are Netflix. And that tends to mean that these things are not necessarily all that useful for a lot of people. And there are specialized databases. For instance, Oracle has this, or not Oracle, Google has this database called F1. It's actually a port of the MySQL database to run on top of another database called Bigtable. Bigtable is a fully distributed database that you can look at as being the world's first world-scale database. They synchronize it using atomic clocks in 14 data centers. So in less than a millisecond, you can be in Europe, update your Gmail, and have that information in your Gmail show up in all 14 data centers around the world. And it's highly reliable, duplicated, super fast, and runs at scale of hundreds of thousands of computers working on a single database all at once. In fact, it's fast enough that one of the applications that Google uses for it is they stream live video into it and take it out at other locations around the world, and it works really well for this as a video streaming platform running through their database. So they have literally trillions of records a day going into this database. So it works at scale. And there are some applications for network databases that also work at scale. Facebook has its own database called Cassandra, and Cassandra works beautifully at the kind of scale that Facebook does, with 5 million plus computers running one database all at the same time. But most applications in the world don't need 5 million computers, nor can people afford that. And the relational databases that work quite well at some pretty large things like GitHub and GitLab, with millions of applications and hundreds of thousands of users, both in their backend, are running on top of Postgres databases. So these other things work really well for an awful lot of stuff. They are networked, and under the covers, what they do is you put in a request for a query. It takes that request, it does the parsing and translation, it actually generates a program that it optimizes to run that request. And out of that program, it then distributes the workload in that program automatically across multiple CPUs for you. So it's not just optimizing the code, it's optimizing how it runs it. And it collects the data for you and returns to you the data. And the same thing happens in update. And it takes into account a lot of things that you may not think about, like rotation speeds of disks and how fast it is to seek to a particular block, and if there's a better way to access the data because you have an index on that data. So it provides lots of optimization that's specific to data and allows you to manage large chunks of data. At the same time, it takes care of a lot of things, like a database has to have a means by which to back up gigabytes of data and do it when only a small amount changes each day. So it has to be able to snapshot that data and allow you to do backups. And things like backups are not necessarily something that people are just jumping up and down, but companies that fail to get their backups correct tend to have disasters and go out of business. So at some point it becomes really, really important that your database has a good backup system. For a number of years, MongoDB did not have a good backup system, and consequently, people had to bake their own. I've also used Neo4j, and again, the backup is somewhat iffy as to how it's going to work and what you're going to do. And it's not been, fire tested for decades, whereas something like Postgres has. So that's kind of databases. Some people solve the problems of things like backup in MongoDB by building a MongoDB emulation layer on top of some other database. Specifically, Microsoft Azure, their high-performance MongoDB database, actually runs on top of a Cassandra cluster and doesn't have any MongoDB in it at all. It's a completely independent thing. But it gives you really reliable backups because Cassandra, Facebook's database, is super redundant across multiple computers and makes multiple copies of all the data. So it eliminates the need for backups and gives you the same kind of capabilities. Databases are probably 10 to 14%, depending on what you look at, of all computational work in the world today. And that means that they are one of the largest, if not the largest, single system software in existence. They build dedicated hardware for them frequently, and there's all sorts of research in how to make databases faster, with just some amazing results like computation in memory and moving database sorts into GPUs so that the GPUs can make the database sort faster. Databases spend about half their time doing nothing more than sorting data. So if you can decrease the sort time, you make the whole database faster.